Okay, here we go. Stand-up accelerator recap for the 43rd week. Well, how many of these recaps I've done, but we've met 43 times. 27 people this week from 3 to 5, 3 to 5:30. It's always funny. There's so many different variations of what this time is, but I think we got it locked. Doors open at 3, supposedly starts at 3:30, but I'm starting it at 3, and we can go to 5:30. But that will change every week, I'm sure. Anyway, in the career time, we start out by discussing different ways of getting paid. And David Kahn mentioned that he had been paid in meat this week with barbecue. So why not? There are worse ways to get paid. David does marketing for a barbecue place, and he's actually setting up a stand-up show there, I think on July 5th, where he will pay people in meat. They'll give barbecue sandwiches and barbecue dinners and so on and so on. I've been paid in worse ways. So also talked during the career section about working on your networking skills, even going outside of stand-up and reaching out to other areas of entertainment. There's a lot of video and film and theater and live shows and music here in Austin. And all those entertainment contacts have other contacts. And you never know when people might need your skills, what the things that you do, or when their skills will become very useful to you. So don't only network with comics in the local scene. First of all, that'll depress you because most comics are struggling so hard, they don't have a lot of connections as you move up the ladder anyway. So it's sometimes useful to go outside that and make other connections. And that way you create a web of useful and helpful people you can trade favors with. And that's what a network is. That's why I have no problem with people networking. It's a co-favor situation. You agree that, hey, I'm going to try to do things for you every chance I get, and you're going to do the same for me. Sometimes people don't hold up their end of the bargain, but it doesn't matter. You just keep making those connections, and many people will hold up their end. We then jump to this week's skill acquisition area in the stand-up development process, which is writing positive comedy. Positive, all positive comedy, which is a very interesting aspect of stand-up because stand-up in general, and Austin in particular, has a very dark orientation, a very edgy orientation to, and very negative orientation to its stand-up. And that's sort of the history of stand-up. Stand-ups typically, they grow from the jesters at courts and the fools in Shakespeare. And those people, those characters were kept around because they had something to say that was different than everybody else. It's not just that they're clowns and that everything's happy and goofy. They also comment, they critique, they unmask, they negate, they take shots at power. And in some ways, that's taken over stand-up. If you get to the far reaches of it, you become an edgelord where you're just transgressing. It's just about taboo breaking. It's just about trolling. Who can you upset? What's the worst things that can be said? And that's fine. It's just a different area of comedy. The art of being negative is how they earn their place in the big conversation. It's how they earn their living. It's a little harder, I think, in some ways, maybe often a lot harder to earn a living with edgelording unless you're really, really good at it. Because who wants to pay to bring in a sort of grousy, critical assassin to their event? You never know who they're going to make mad, who they're going to, take shots at. They're just as likely to take shots at you as somebody else. So they're a little, it's a little chancy. It's a little risky to bring them in. But if you're good enough at it, then, you can create a fan base. A lot of people like to watch bloodsport done with verbal jousting and attacks. Which is great. Again, go do it. But the bigger majority of people and the more conservative buyers out there won't touch an edgelord. They're so afraid of getting blowback from anything negative happening that they have to basically be guaranteed that you won't be negative. And they'll list things that you can't talk about. When I was on cruise ships, you weren't supposed to talk about politics and religion and sex, and other cruise ships don't have those restrictions. They run it more like a comedy club. But when I was doing theaters, yeah, it was very restrictive, and to the point where you can't even predict like what's going to offend somebody. But it's kind of like they judge you backwards. If something offends people, then they judge that you did the offensive thing. Not like, hey, 99% of the people like this joke or weren't offended by it, but hey, one conservative person over here or one person that's very sensitive to language over here didn't like that. So we're going to tell you about it and fire you. They often do. So if you can't keep positive, if you just even skirt on negative, those buyers will fire you. But the second thing about writing positive is so it's not just, that you can't be negative. It's also keeping it comedy club level funny. At the end of the day, I don't care whether you're clean or dirty or if you're positive or negative. I don't care what kind of comedy you do. Just is it at the level of comedy club funny? And that means it gets gut bust laughter every few seconds. Or when you do a punchline, it's an intense reaction. It's not just a chuckle or, okay, what's next? It's people are overtaken by the laughs. Really great stand up doesn't give people the option of not laughing at it because it's so surprising and so powerful when it hits in their brain, they bust out laughing. And when you get enough of those jokes, then you're running like a real stand up, pro level stand up. And you can do that completely with positive comedy, clean, inoffensive, positive comedy. There are comics who've done this very well, including Brian Regan, Nate Bargatze right now, probably Maria Bamford would fit in there. Some of the absurdist comics, they're not really ever taking shots at things so much. And those are very high dollar acts, incredibly high dollar acts for Bargatze and Regan, and Maria too, when she was at her height. And they can draw families, they can draw all age ranges, they can draw all political orientations because they don't do anything offensive. So even if the crowd is half Democrat, half Republican, they don't upset anybody, which is kind of amazing when you think about it. Not saying, again, not saying everybody has to do that, but it is possible to do that, is my point. The first element in do that, so there are three things to think about to get started in writing positive and doing positive comedy. One, you have to avoid the negatives. And this is the easiest thing to think about, like for creating positivity, is essentially getting rid of the negatives, the things that people recognize easily. This includes profanity, obscenity, graphicness, a lot of sex in general just is problematic for people. Deviance in general, so drugs and alternative sex and alternative lifestyles and anything that's different. Controversial topics, politics, social issues, religion. Those things are basically taken off the table. You can still do them, but they have to get down to where it's at least neutral. You're not exposing somebody to the full frontal force of the negativity. Of course, telling comedians not to talk about those things is, I say, like trying to muzzle an elephant with a shoestring. Good luck. Like comics revel in the fact that they are allowed to say things that other people aren't. And again, totally get that. That's cool. But if you want to write positive, you kind of take those issues off the table. Or if you're going to talk about them, you do it in a positive way. Like there's totally ways of doing religious comedy in a positive way, or social issue comedy or whatever. It just has to be sort of done with positivity. And the way to think about this is sort of the second major tool is interpersonal positivity, which is one of the things I teach that I've always really enjoyed teaching, meaning that you use communication tools that keep things positive when you're writing or when you're talking to an audience, when you're doing stand-up. So you do things like you use praise and compliments and validations and congratulations, and you express gratitude, you acknowledge people, you value people, you say you value people. When you do these things, you bring the audience, even those people that are against you, more towards you. So instead of going to war with someone, you're actually recruiting them to your side. I told people in the class that it's also a very good policy to use these in your regular relationships. If you just saturate everything with positive interpersonals, and it's just communication techniques, you also want to be authentic. You want to mean it. You want to have, some sort of solidity behind it. But at the end of the day, it's just technique. So you keep the negative interpersonals out. So no insults, no attacks, no criticisms, no disagreements, no frontal, confrontations. And you try to do it all with interpersonal positivity. Last thing, it doesn't matter what you're doing in stand-up or in comedy, whatever you put out there, you have to drown it in comedy writing. And for us, the things we've been working on, things like writing many variations to something. So you never say what's expected. You always write a variation. You always heighten. So instead of just a light compliment, it's the greatest compliment you've ever heard. So if you're talking about barbecue, you sort of heighten how much you love barbecue, or how great this particular barbecue was. You also do reversals where you go back in a direction people don't expect. And you use things that are already pre-soaked in positivity, that as soon as you mention them, people are already positive about them. So it's fine to start with really straight up, unfunny statements about something that are positive, but then you have to treat it heavily with stand up and with comedy writing techniques. And that's what makes it worthy to go on a stand up stage. So we did a few exercises for this during class. First, we started by talking about something we love, which was barbecue, since it was the theme. So people sat down and wrote all the positive things that they could think of about barbecue or their barbecue experiences or barbecue places they'd been. Secondly, we put everybody at tables of four, and they were supposed to write down positive things that they thought about each other. That could be from your appearance, from your personality, from your vibe, from something they've seen you do before or conversations. So some type of compliment. And finally, we did writing positive things about a location. And I suggested writing about states. I'm from Kentucky. Kaway was in the workshop again this week, and she's from Alabama. And those places are usually seen super negative. So if you go positive and rescue the positive things in there, it really opens up some interesting new content that other people may not be doing, because almost all the other comics are working the negative seams. You know, they're going into the comedy mines and just hacking away to get the negative gold, while the positive gold just sits over there. So it's a good area to go and explore. Lots of funny stuff came from this. We even staged a little bit of a compliment battle, which I think is something that I might try to develop. I'm not exactly sure how it would work, but I think it would be fun to counter program all the roast battles with a straight up positive, compliment or praise battle, something. Next week, we're going to talk about turning everyday stories into stand-up ready stories, which is something I really like to teach, something I really like to talk about. We talked about it a little bit in the comedy writing group already, but we're going to break it down into the things that turn into stand-up. And since everybody has literally hundreds and thousands of stories about themselves and their lives, if you get really good at this, you're opening up a big trunk load of never-ending material. Not just your super exotic stories, but even your everyday stories can be turned into really stand-up ready material. So there you go. That's it. That's the recap. See you next time.